Hi, this is Jack Kim and welcome back to my channel. Okay, so today what I have for you guys is Microeconomics market structure. So market structure, a lot of students or a lot of my friends I saw seem to struggle, especially on the evaluation part, because there's so many components of it. I'll run through every single components or the points of strengths and weaknesses of the market structures within this question. So I hope you guys can pay attention real well. And I hope this video helps all of you guys who are struggling, especially with market structure. Okay, so for today, I brought you guys two questions. Once again, it's a paper 1 style question. So 1A is, would loss-making PC firm shut down in the long run? And 1B is PC versus monopoly, which is more desirable in market structure. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so of course you have to talk about, okay, now we're going to solve 1A. Of course, we have to start with a good definition of perfect competition. Now, when you talk about perfect competition or any market structure and you're trying to give a definition, you have to give them every single one of the assumptions. Now, as you can see, I cannot recite all of these things off of my head, so I always write it down before I explain. So, the different assumptions of perfect competition is: first, there's low barriers of entry. The second, there's homogeneous goods. Third, there's perfect information. Fourth, perfect resource mobility. And last but not least, there's many firms, but there are small firms. Okay, so all of these assumptions needs to be listed for you to get the definition point. So let me explain what perfect information and perfect resource mobility means, because a lot of students seem not to be able to understand what that means. Okay, perfect information. So perfect information is when the industry or when the market or the consumers have the same level of understanding of what is happening in the market as the producers. The perfect resource mobility is when a capital is able to be moved from one firm to another or one industry to another without much conundrum. So it's easy to move the capital from one firm to another or one industry to another. Okay, so those are the assumptions, or this is the entire definition of perfect competition. So please write all of these when you're writing the test. Now let's move on to actually answering the question. Alright, so here is the answer for 1A. So I'll be explaining along the way. Of course, the writing section needs to be more elaborate than this. But first of all, let's start off with the graphs. Okay, when you're drawing a perfect competition graph, you always have to draw it in this fashion, where on the left side, you draw the industry, on the right side, you draw the firm. And the industry, you show the demand and supply, and you show the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. Of course, label all your graphs with price and quantity. And later, you have to draw a dotted line over to the firm side and show that the equilibrium price actually becomes the Mr. Darp on the firm side. So in a perfect competition, that we're assuming that MR equals AR, and which also equals to demand and price. So there's a straight line, and you have to do the Nike thing for marginal cost, and there's the U-shaped belly for average total cost. So right now we're assuming that the firm, or we're trying to explain what happens to the firm when it is making a loss in the long run. So we have to draw this diagram in a way that the firm is actually making a loss at this time. Okay, so now you have to label it. Now left side, you always have to label industry. Right side, firm, you can label it industry or market, it really doesn't matter. And the entire graph, you would name it long run loss making. You have to be more elaborate than this. So long run loss making perfect competition firm. But you guys can do that. So next up, so a lot of you guys should be very perplexed when you're approaching this question, because all you guys have learned in class is probably pertaining to shutdowns or break-even prices in the short run. However, I'm guessing that you guys never have dealt a question where the firm, whether or not a perfect competition firm needs to shut down or stay open in the long run. Okay, so the basic concept of whether or not to shut down in the long run for a PC firm basically is derived from the ATC, or the average total cost. So as you guys can see, I did not draw an average fixed cost. So when you're talking about the shutdown and the shutdown price in the short run, you guys always draw an average fixed cost. And based on whether or not the average fixed cost is above or below Mr. DARP, you guys decide whether or not this firm should shut down. However, in the long run, the only factor that really matters is average total cost. Okay, let me explain why. Okay, so in the long run, and as you can see, the profit maximization. Oh, my bad. So in the long run, if the perfect competition is doing okay, so you're assuming that the perfect competition firm is profit maximizing. So the profit maximization point is, of course, MR equals MC. Now MR equals MC, the graph intersects over here, and you'd have to label this Q2, and you'd go up here and label this as P2. Notice that you have to label this different from these two, not because you're trying to show a shift, but because these two are two different things, so you have to label it differently. Alright, so now that you have labeled it, so now that you have identified where the firm is going to be operating at, you have to explain how this firm is making a loss in the long run in this situation. So you'd have to explain that through making an equation. So right now you can see that this firm is making a loss because P2 minus P1 multiplied by Q2 is the amount of loss they're making. So you have to write that in your answer. And after you show that there's a loss, now you have to move on onto exactly why a PC firm would shut down just because they have loss in the long run. Okay, so let's think about this. A perfect competition, there's very low barriers of entry or exit. So take, for example, potato farming and sweet potato farming, so the two industries. So perhaps this is a potato industry, so you're a PC firm working in the potato industry, and you're making a loss. But then the sweet potato industry is making an abnormal profit, or it's making a normal profit. So as a farmer or the producer or the PC firm, you would switch from the potato industry to the sweet potato industry. And here's the reason why. Since you're a PC firm, you have a very weak market power, so you can also change the situation of the market or the situation of your firm as of right now. So what you would have to do is you would have to exit the industry because it is not profitable for you. So you're making a loss, and the firm, why would it stay in the potato industry when they can make a profit in the sweet potato industry? And remember, in a perfect competition, there's perfect resource mobility, and especially potato and sweet potato, you just have to buy different seeds. So it's not really hard to switch from one industry to another. So as a PC firm in the long run, if you're making a loss, it's more profitable or it's more beneficial for you to switch the industry from potato to a sweet potato. So a PC firm would shut down in the long run if there is even the slightest loss, because that's more beneficial for themselves. So here, average fixed cost doesn't really matter, because whether or not the average fixed cost is below or above a Mr. DARP, the thing is they're still making a loss. So they still have to go out, even if they seem to be able to pull off, even if the AFC is below Mr. DARP. Okay. So the final conclusion, the firm would shut down. Reason, all the things I've just explained. So here, one thing to notice is that ATC is the only thing that really matters, and AFC does not really matter in the long run, of course. Okay, also you might want to explain why AFC doesn't really matter in the long run. Okay, take for example, you are a restaurant. You're a restaurant. Oh wait, but that's not perfect competition. Okay, so take for example your convenience store, and the convenience store is a perfect competition because there's tons of convenience stores around you. And in order to be a convenience store, you need to pay a certain amount of fixed cost, which is going to be rental fees. So in the short run, that would matter whether or not to shut down, because the rental fee is a type of opportunity cost. So if you shut down, even if the AFC is below Mr. Darb, that is highly unbeneficial for you, because you're not because you're technically wasting money, or you're wasting the amount of fixed cost you have spent in getting the rental contract. But then in the long run, it doesn't matter, because when the rental contract ends, the fixed cost doesn't matter anymore. So in the long run, the AFC becomes obsolete. It's technically useless in the long run, because we're assuming that the rental contract ended. So the AFC doesn't matter anymore. So that's another part that you might want to mention about why ATC is the only part that really matters compared to AFC. Yeah. Good. Now I'll be moving on to 1B. Now, of course, 1B, now you have to explain what monopoly is, or give a definition. Now, so the question asks you about monopoly and perfect competition, but you don't have to define perfect competition because you already did it before in 1A. So you would only have to define monopoly. So once again, these are different assumptions for monopoly. First, there's high barriers of entry, so it's hard for other firms to enter the industry. And the second one is that there's perfect product differentiation. And lastly, there's only one firm representing the entire market. Okay, so out of the three assumptions made for a monopoly, perfect product differentiation seems to be a part that confuses a lot of my friends. Okay, so perfect product differentiation means that it is completely heterogeneous. The goods that is produced by the monopolies. So to give you an example, so in South Korea there's this electricity firm. So there's only one electricity firm in South Korea. So that's the only firm that provides energy for the whole entire nation. So the question is, electricity is a very heterogeneous good. Like, how else are you going to give it energy? So I understand that you guys are thinking about fuel and all those stuff, but that is essentially, or it becomes electricity. So electricity, it's completely heterogeneous, and that's why there's perfect product differentiation. Okay, now I'll be moving on to different evaluation points of monopoly and perfect competition. Okay, first I'll be explaining the strengths and weaknesses of monopoly. Okay, of course we have to begin with a good graph. Okay, the graph is composed of AR, MR, MC, and ATC. Okay, as you can see, it's completely different from how perfect competition is drawn. So AR has a slope and MR has a slope, and unlike perfect competition, they're split. So one thing you guys have to know is that MR has approximately twice the slope of AR. So just note that to yourself as you're drawing. And when you're drawing it, you have to make the MR cross the x-axis. It's just how it's done. Just to show that MR could be less than 0. Okay, it just shows that you have better understanding of the content that is presented to you. Okay, now you have to talk about, you have to label Q1, whereas MR equals MC. So where it crosses, that's where the profit maximization point is. And you have to explain that P3 minus P2 multiplied Q1 is going to be the profit that my firm makes. So as you can see, I've marked 2 extra points. So one is P1 and the other is Q2. These come in handy when you're explaining the different efficiencies or evaluating the efficiencies. Those are weaknesses. So I'll keep that for that. I'll just leave that aside for a moment. But first I'll be talking about strengths. Okay, whether or not the monopoly is in a short run or long run, as you can see in the graph, this type of firm can make abnormal profit. So as I've explained previously, P3 minus P2 multiplied Q1 is going to be the profit of the abnormal profit of monopoly. So if there's abnormal profit, the budget of the firm increases. And if the budget of the firm increases, they're more capable of doing research and development. That is highly beneficial for a firm because their overall capital or the infrastructure, or the goods that they're producing, the quality of it, or the technology of it can improve. So research development is very, very nice. And also, because of the research and development, as well as the size of the firm, it is easier for these type of firms to access economies of scale. Now let's think about this. There are different types of economies of scale, but I'll make 3 different examples. So first one is bulk buying. Second one is transportation EOS, and last one is advertisement EOS, promotional EOS. Okay, so when it comes down to bulk buying, Monopoly is the only firm that will be competing for buying that bulk buying process, because there's no other firms that are competing to get that bulk buying. Also, Monopoly has a lot of money, so they can buy a huge amount of bulk buying. So rather than a small bulk buying, they can get a huge bulk buying. That means the one input that the input cost would decrease, or the cost of production would decrease. So that allows for economies of scale. For transportation EOS, because they have so much money, they may be able to invest into different transportation ways, whether that be airports, whether that be airplanes, trucks, boats. If these technologies or the qualities of these transportation methods are improved, that means the firm is able to transport their products in a more efficient manner. And if that happens, EOS. Lastly, promotional EOS. So promotional EOS, because they're a monopoly, they have a lot of money, they can give a lot of advertisements, and if they make a lot of advertisements, more people would be willing to buy their product. And because they have a lot of money, they can make good advertisements. So if they make good advertisements, more people would be buying their product, which helps them increase the abnormal profit. And of course, the process just repeats itself. Therefore, it can gain EOS. So these are the 3 main strengths of a monopoly. Now I'll be talking about its weakness. Okay, so these are weaknesses of the monopoly. So first of all, there's going to be X inefficiency when there's no competition. Okay, I'm expecting that a lot of you that do not know what X inefficiency is. So X inefficiency is when a firm or monopoly is it does not have competition, right? Because they are the only firm that exists in the industry. So because there's no competition, these monopolies would start slacking off, and they would they just not really care about what they're doing with not being more efficient. So instead of producing at the profit maximization price, they may decide to just go over the profit maximization price and create some type of loss. And if that happens, they don't really care because they still have profit. So the thing is, because of X inefficiency, monopolies tend to become more and more inefficient. And because they become more inefficient because of the lack of competition, it hinders their own firm, because they have chances of research and development and improvement of their firm, but they decide not to do so. So that is X inefficiency, in that the firm becomes lazy and they don't want to become more efficient. Okay, now we're talking about the normal efficiencies of allocative and productive efficiencies. So allocative efficiency is achieved when MC equals AR, my bad. So when MC equals AR, this means that the firm is allocating all their resources to fully satisfy the demand of the market. So, MC equals AR. So where it intersects, and that's going to be quantity 2. So assuming that the monopoly is going to be operating at the profit maximization point, Q1, they're unable to satisfy the allocative efficiency. As you can see, Q2 is different from Q1. And there's going to be under allocation, which is this type of market failure. And the other part is productive efficiency. So productive efficiency is achieved when ATC is at its minimum point. And as you can see, they're also unable to achieve productive efficiency, because the productive efficiency is Q3, but once again, they're profit maximizing, and that is Q1, so those are 2 different quantities. So they're unable to satisfy productive efficiency as well. So the overall weakness is mainly has regards on the efficiency of the overall firm. Okay, now I'll be moving on to perfect competition. Okay, once again, you have to draw the graph of perfect competition, and when it comes down to drawing the graph for this question, you don't have to draw the industry because this is the only part that really matters. But if you really want to draw it, you can, but doesn't really matter. Okay, so for the perfect competition, you have to assume that it's occurring in the long run because there are more strengths in the long run. So it's usually evaluated in a way that it is in the long run. Okay, because if it's not in the long run, there's no strength, to be honest. Okay, so in the long run, of course, due to low barriers of entry or exit, based on the loss or abnormal profit that there is in the market, the firms would exit or enter the industry, and because of that, the ATC would be matched up to Mr. DARP, and this is how the graph is going to look like. Okay, for efficiency, it is highly efficient because of the allocative and productive efficiency they're able to satisfy. So the allocative efficiency, once again, is achieved when MC equals AR, MC, cross point, Q1. And also, you can see that actually this is also the point where the profit is maximized. So MR equals MC. So the perfect competition firm is going to operate at a quantity where allocative efficiency is satisfied. So when it comes down to productive efficiency, you can see that the minimum amount, that ATC, the minimum point, is also where the firm is going to gain profit maximization, or that's where the firm is going to be operating. So when it comes down to efficiency, the perfect competition, unlike the monopoly, is going to be able to gain both allocative and productive efficiency. Also, there is no inefficiency. Because there's always going to be competition in perfect competition, because one of the assumptions is that there's a lot of firms, a lot of small firms. And because of that, there's not going to be X inefficiency because they have constant pressure of competition for them to constantly be at the best quality as they can. So they cannot have X inefficiency or else they're going to go bankrupt. Okay, so now I'll be moving on to the weaknesses of perfect competition. All right, we're almost done. Weaknesses of perfect competition. So first of all, you have to make the point that all the goods or the firms within perfect competition, all the products that they're producing is homogeneous. So they don't have the incentive to develop their product, because how are you going to develop an apple? Like, you cannot make the quality of it better. Like, you cannot put AI in it. I mean, you technically can by growing better quality apples, but that's not a significant product development. Product development usually is when a product's technology becomes better. So it's hard to say that there's going to be any product development for the goods in perfect competition, and there's not going to be any research and development. Okay, bruh. Perfect competition, they're barely gonna make any money. Because they're gonna make barely any money, they don't have any much budget. And if they don't have any much budget, they cannot do research and development because they have to use the money to live. They cannot invest their money into any part of their firm. So it's very hard for the perfect competition firms to actually have research and development. And because of that, and because they have not that big of a budget, they have no EOS. Also, these are small firms. These are small firms. Like, if you think about like different farming industries, individual firms technically are farmers. Farmers, they're not a big firm, so it's nearly impossible for them to gain economies of scale. Okay, so based on this, we can tell that it is hard for these perfect competition firms to actually develop or improve the quality of the goods for different reasons. Okay, now we'll be moving on to the conclusion. Okay, now in the conclusion, of course, you can straight up say, well, based on your personal discretion, you can say that perfect competition is better because it's more efficient, or you can say monopoly is better because you can have more research and development. But actually, the best type of evaluation that shows how much you actually understand of the content is splitting the best choice or the more desirable firm based on the stakeholders that you're evaluating from. So for a conclusion, when you're a consumer, perfect competition is way better because perfect competition is satisfy allocative and productive efficiency. And because of the high efficiency, the consumers are able to gain the best or most consumer surplus. So it is for consumers, it is desirable if a firm is in a perfect competition. However, in the producer's perspective, monopoly is so much better because they're able to self-invest and improve their overall firm. And most basically, the producers can make a ton of money. And because they can make a ton of money, they'd rather be a monopoly than a perfect competition. Basic concepts. Now, I did not put any examples within explaining. However, when you're answering the question, it is best if you put examples in. So I'm hoping that you guys can do that on your own. So this is the conclusion. Like, you stop here. Like, don't write anything else. And you're good. Okay, thank you guys for watching this video. Once again, I love you guys. I'll see you next time.